Welcome to the 2022 Garden City State of the City Address. I'm Mayor Shannon Dick, and so I'm going to go through just the presentation that I gave at the Chamber of Commerce's breakfast. A little bit of updates since then, but this is pretty much it, and we'll go through and talk about a couple of things. We're going to look at a little bit of what's happened in 2021 or 2022. Some of the things that we're working on with our goals for the year. And then we're going to look at some economic data because that's really the fun stuff, charts and stuff like that, because that's the kind of stuff that I like. So we'll go look at some of that stuff. So the first thing is we kind of had a gauntlet thrown down, if you saw this in the news a month or so ago, from the mayor of New York City, who really was talking about branding and what is branding in communities, and do different communities have brands and things like that. So watch this little clip, and then we'll get back to it, and then we'll start talking about what is Garden City's brand, and what do we stand for, and what are we striving for.
We have a brand. New York has a brand. And when people see it, it means something. You know, when we go there, it's not, Kansas doesn't have a brand. When you go there, okay, you're from Kansas. No. Well, you know what? But New York has a brand. It has a brand.
Okay. So we'll talk about that video a little bit more and how it relates to what our branding is. But the first thing I'd like to talk about is just some of the accomplishments that we've had over the last year throughout the city. So we'll talk about some of the accomplishments for this year. So the first is that the regional airport, we broke ground on a completely new terminal. This is going to double the size of the terminal. We're going to be able to have two different gates available. We'll be able to take in larger planes. And as the projected finishing for this is 2024. The next thing is the phase 2 of the golf course improvement plan was completed in fall of 2021, which included holes number 2, 8, 16, and 17. And phase 3 of the improvement plan started in September of this year, of 2022, and they're going to renovate holes 1, 15, and 18. So that's pretty cool. We were able to open up the gun indoor range. That was done in April 2022. And this was because of several partnerships with the police department, the city, Garden City Community College, Sand and Sage Rifle and Pistol Club. This has time that's open to the public, and this is one of the sales tax projects that we passed in 2017 that was built now. We also were able to move the municipal court over to the old Telegram building, and then there's that great new mural on the side of that Mikey Knudsen did. That the move was done was completed for the municipal court February 9th of 2022, and then we just recently did a tour with the city commission for the evidence side of that building, and that's really neat, and that's going to be opening up, and they actually are transferring all that evidence over there now. So that part of the building is also open as well. We had some big construction projects through Neighborhood Development Services, such as the 8th Street reconstruction. So if you go down 8th Street now, in the downtown portion of 8th Street, you'll see all the new streetscape, more handicap accessible places for getting into the businesses, new trees. The light poles really match the aesthetic that you see in Main Street. So that's a great improvement. It really looks good in that area. We also reconstructed Farmland Road, which is over out east on the industrial part of town, kind of in the TP&L kind of area. And then also the road on Jenny Barker, we finished up that reconstruction there, which again was another sales tax project, but that really opens up the amount of traffic that can handle going on that east side of town. Another big thing that was completed this year was the splash pad at Garden Rapids. That was done in June. Get ready for the new swim year that we had this last summer. And a big thanks to the Finite Foundation for the grant to replace that splash pad. So if you remember, we had an issue where there was some concerns about the previous splash pad, and the Finite Foundation really stepped up and said that they would support putting in an updated splash pad to go with the updated Garden Rapids at the Big Pool facility. So that was a great project. We also are working on the skate park at Finup Scout Park, and so if you're seeing this sometime from when we record this, right now it's under construction, so it's really neat to go out there and see what this skate park is shaping up to be like. A lot of the features that are requested through the surveys of the community and the skating community. So that's good to see. It looks like this will be done really close to the end of the year, if not maybe a little bit into early 2023, but that's a really good project. We also had the replacement of the turf at Clinton Lightner Field, and it looks amazing. So that's a really good improvement to that facility. And then there's been other improvements to some of the other facilities, recreational facilities in the community. In Lee Richardson Zoo, the flight area for the Marie Osberger Avery, it was been updated with new mesh and poles and a new pond. The East Maple water transmission improvement projects, which included 2.6 miles of water main providing additional water carrying capability to the eastern part of Garden City. And along with that, we have booster station number 8 that helps us carry out our water infrastructure further east in town. So the emergency generators at the wastewater treatment plant were updated. This included replacing the generators at the Headworks and the SolidWorks processing buildings and adding emergency generators at the administrative laboratory building in the Pheasant Valley lift station. We had improvements at the wastewater collection system and treatment facility, which was completed in September 2021, which repaired the structures at the treatment facility and upgrades to 3 sewer lift stations in the collection system. And then we had improvements to the wastewater treatment plant aeration, where the improvements will increase the aeration capacity of the treatment facility to meet the demands of industrial development underway in Garden City. So we're really working on improving the water and the wastewater capacity in Garden City to be able to handle the additional demand of the new industrial developments that are coming on, as well as the growth that the city sees out to the east. Along with that, on the utility side of things, we finalized the asset purchase agreement with Wheatland Electric and Sunflower Power Corporation, and this gives the city ownership of the substation assets that connect to the 115,000 volt bulk transmission system. So that's further securing some of our electricity and electric needs. So we also had some really good hires recently, and I'm just going to name a couple. We hired a new fire chief, John Ursick. That was really at the end of 2021, but he came on through this whole year. And then we also hired 2 assistant city managers, Danielle Burke and Derek Ramos. Okay, also in 2022, we undertook a lot of community input projects. We had the Garden City Community Master Plan that we are starting and got community input with, Downtown Comprehensive Plan. We did the ice rink and recreation facility feasibility study, the water marketing study, fire department organizational study. So a lot of planning for the future also took place during 2022, which is really good because that kind of sets us up for the future. In 2023, we have a couple of things that I'd like to highlight to look forward to. With golf, we're going to start the Phase 4 renovations, which is holes 5, 6, and 7. With Parks and Rec, we're looking at completing the Phase 3 of Southeast Park, getting restrooms in at Rotary Park, which is along Rotary Park is by Georgia Matthews, which is right in the middle of Tally Trail. So it'll be a really good place for people who are using Tally Trail, but also for the people that use the Rotary Park as practices for soccer and football. We're also working on doing the renovations at the concession stands and the restrooms at Clint Lightner Field. The police department, Senator Jerry Moran announced a federal investment of $500,000 to the police department to acquire a mobile command emergency 911 dispatch center. So that's really neat, and thanks to Senator Moran for helping with that project. For the water department, they're going to be constructing a new water tower north of Jamison Energy Center. And then with the fire department, we're looking to start construction on the third fire station, which will also include the third EMS station over at the corner of Shulman Crossing and Jenny Barker. So a lot more projects than that slated, but those are just some of the highlights that we can look forward to in 2023. Now, the next thing that I'd like to talk about is some of the goals. What we talked about before was just some of the accomplishments that we had in 2022. But every year, at the beginning of the year, the City Commission gets together and we have a goal-setting retreat. And so we make a document, or actually, the City Manager, Matt Allen, makes a document. He kind of records everything that we do here. And this talks about what our goals are. For this year, and then we'll do it again for 2023. But it's really good to talk about this because a lot of the things that we work on as a city isn't just things that just come up and we just kind of address them as they come up. There's a lot of strategic planning that goes into this. So I'd like to just talk about some of those. From this document, there's 56 goals that we came up that were overarching goals. And then from that, there are 18 top priority goals. So pretty comprehensive when we're talking about 56 goals for a year, and not all of them are things that we can accomplish in one year. Some of them are just like we're going to start the steps forward. So I'm going to go through some of these goals and just talk a little bit about them. So the first strategic objective is improving transportation infrastructure. And under this, some of the major goals that we have was advocate for 4 lanes along US 83 from I-40 to I-80. And part of that is just to recognize the tremendous traffic, industrial and commuting traffic that we have along that, and to advocate for a corridor that really connects from, we'll say, like between Amarillo and North Platte, to bring the products that we grow and we make in Western Kansas to the rest of the United States. And goal was advocate for 4 lanes along 400 to Wichita. And so we've seen, if you drove out to Wichita, you've seen that the 4 lanes is under construction right now between Cimarron and Dodge City. We just had some regional meetings with KDOT where they're doing the initial planning stages from where it isn't divided yet from the airport to Cimarron. And they're tentatively looking at starting those projects in a couple of years to be done at least by 2030. We don't know. I mean, that's their plan. We don't know if that's actually what's going to happen. But at least we see that 400 route, at least from Garden City to Dodge being done. There is some work. We're talking about Mullinville out to Wichita. There is some work on continuing dividing that out. So that's one of those goals that we're getting some good progress on. And just recently, really seeing some that highway division between at least Garden City and Dodge City. Expand the air service at Garden City Regional Airport was one of our goals, and we can see that we're being allowed to do that with the expansion of the terminal. And then plan for a new bypass around town, just because the current bypass is really becoming interior street, and we'll need to work with KDOT to figure out a new bypass to try to get some of that truck traffic outside of the area. The next strategic objective we had was research and plan the development of major community projects. So we had goals such as facilitate progress on the Star Bond project, which if you've seen the progress on Sports of the World, they're back out there. They're actually doing the groundwork again. And this is behind the Parrot Cove and Heritage Motel right behind there. That's that area. So that's going. Research the feasibility of an ice rink, new recreation facility, and a civic center. And we actually did contract with Hunden to do market research and do a feasibility study for an ice rink and recreation facility. And we actually are going to see a draft report about that here next week. So that's underway. And then explore the options for the State Theater. And that's another one where we are actually starting to work on an RFP proposal to see what people would like to do, or if there's any groups that would like to do something with the State Theater and get that out to the community. So that's underway as well. The next strategic objective is develop a policy and optimize internal operations. These are things like upgrade the city's financial software, and we've got that one underway. We're getting that taken care of. Develop partnerships with cities and other taxing entities in the region. And some of this is because since we're the largest city in western Kansas, there's resources that we have that other smaller communities like Scott City and Ulysses and Lakin and our communities around us don't necessarily have. So we want to be as a leading city, try to be able to share the resources that we have and the knowledge and those sorts of things with those other communities to help them grow, because Garden City, the success of Garden City isn't just our town or our city limits. I mean, when Holcomb grows, when Cimarron grows, when Syracuse grows, that helps Garden City, and then we grow as well. So we want to be good partners with the rest of the cities around us, and that's one of the goals for the City Commission. We also want to increase the availability of naturalization services to help our refugee population or migrant population and try to reduce the burden that they have to take on to try to keep on staying here legally. And if we don't have those services coming out here to Western Kansas, that's days that they're going to have to be going to Wichita, which means they're having to take vacation days from work. To just go out and do some simple paperwork and things like that. So the more we can get those services here in western Kansas and specifically Garden City, the better our population will be served in that area. Strategic objective, maintain and develop infrastructure. We have a goal to develop a plan for doubling water and wastewater capacity. And you saw from some of the projects that we got done in 2020, we're kind of laying that groundwork to double that infrastructure. And the reason you want to double that infrastructure is so we have the ability to keep on growing with our industrial projects and our residential developments. Finance a unified public works facility. Plan for a regional water system. This is one of those, the regional water system is one of those things where we need to recognize that when we're talking about water in western Kansas, it's not just about do we have enough water, it's do we have good quality water as well. And so we know that there are some communities in the area that have to consider the quality that they're getting. And does Garden City, or is there a role for Garden City to play where we can start to talk about water regionally and address it in a regional fashion? Pursue renewable energy options with KMEA, and then plan and implement water reuse strategies. And so this water reuse is actually a really interesting topic where we're taking our industrial water. For example, we'll just use the example of DFA's water. So Dairy Farmers America, they're taking milk in. The product that they're getting out of that is powdered milk. So they're taking the water out of that milk, and they get the powder, and then they ship it off as their product. The city, Garden City, actually takes the water that they're getting out of that milk, and we're taking it into our system. And right now we can't use it as drinkable water, even though it's water from milk. We can't use it directly as drinkable water. So this is parts of the things that we're trying to get established where we can start reusing or using some of this water. So with this water that's coming off the DFA plant, that's like 1 million gallons of water a day at full when they're working at full capacity. This is a lot of water that we can use for our community to offset some of that groundwater pumping. And so when we're looking at those strategies to continue to be good stewards of water and to continue the growth that we can have, these water reuse projects is really something that we're looking into. And we're actually getting some federal support in this realm. And I think 2023 we'll see some pretty good progress on this topic. The strategic objective, improve and expand parks and public spaces. We're looking at developing an additional dog park. We're continuing work on Southeast Community Park. Looking at, like we talked about, we're starting that new skate park. So that's getting going. Funding and promoting community art. So we saw that first piece that's on the municipal court building, but in Southeast Park, we just awarded an artist to do a mural on that. And then we want to, as a city commission, we want to continue to promote those community arts just because it makes the community a nicer place to come and visit and live and things like that. And then also plan and develop for public restrooms along trails. And that goal, we can see that we're already working on that with that public restroom on Tally Trail that we're just getting going in 2023. And then the final big strategic objective was develop and meet demand and explore new development tactics. So we're researching implementing mixed-use zoning. So we're talking about buildings where you have commercial on the first floor and then residential above, kind of like what you see downtowns. But looking at expanding that zoning to more places if there's developers who'd like to see that kind of development getting built. And in a lot of those bigger cities, like you see in Overland Park and places like Manhattan and stuff like that, there's that kind of mixed-use building is being used more, and it increases the density of the community, which actually reduces the cost of the infrastructure. So it's a really good thing for us to be looking at. We'd also like to, with that mixed use, I mean, part of it is to increase the density. So one of our actual goals is to increase the density of developments to reduce the infrastructure cost, which in the end makes it cheaper for builders to build the developments, housing units and so forth. So that's one of our goals. And then we also are developing a plan. One of our goals is to develop a plan to reach 4,000 new housing units by 2030. And that's a pretty big goal. We'll talk about this a little bit more. What does that look like when we start looking at the chart section of this presentation? But right now in Garden City, we have about 12,000 housing units. So if we're talking about a goal of adding 4,000 more in by 2030, that's a pretty significant growth that we're trying to anticipate. So that's some pretty big goals that we have set. And again, those are our goals for 2022. 2023 will come around, we'll have a new goal setting retreat, and we'll have some new goals. Some of the goals will be the same as 2022, and then some of them will be new. Okay, so my favorite part. This is going to just talk about some of the economic indicators of Garden City and Finney County, and just some of the things that are just good to know when you're operating in the city and when you're talking to people about our community. So the first thing I want to talk about is the population of Garden City and Finney County. So if we look at the census, the chart that we have here is the population growth from 2010 to 2020. And the bluer you are, the more population you grow. So the census showed that Finney County did really well. So and when we're looking at this chart, Finney County is that kind of backwards L-shaped county there. That's the darker blue. So the census did acknowledge that we did have a pretty good amount of growth over the 2010 census. Now, if we go, remember back to the 2020 census, though, there was some political charging to the census this time around. There were some possibilities that there's going to be citizenship questions and some other things that really made some of our population that's at risk be less likely to participate in the census, because we need to remember when we're talking about the census, the people that are doing it, I mean, the idea is everybody, like literally everybody, doing it, but really those people that the at-risk population, especially when it was politically charged like this, really didn't have anything to gain by doing the census, but potentially, and unfoundedly, but potentially could have lost a lot by doing the census. So what we talk about, and it's not just Finney County or Kansas. This was a nationwide kind of issue. But if we talk about in Kansas, where do we have this at-risk population, and what this really would lead to is an undercount in our census numbers. And so if we go look at the proportion of population that's at risk in Kansas, and we look at a map of this, we definitely see that this is an issue for Southwest Kansas here in Finney County and Ford County and Seward County and a little bit of Grant County. So when we're talking about a potential undercount, this really is, in Kansas, a Southwest Kansas issue that we really need to be the champion of and saying, hey, listen, I know we got a census count. We actually came out pretty good. We got a pretty good census count. But we still think there's reasons to think that we missed some people in the count. So I talked with some experts locally that work with those those populations and said, in your opinion, what % of people do you think that were at risk didn't take the census? And there was a pretty good kind of common a number, about 1/3 didn't do it. So that would mean like out of every 3 at-risk families, 2 did the census, 1 didn't do the census. If we looked at some of our other data, we had some idea that it maybe was closer to 1/4. So that's the number when I'm talking about what our potential true population is in Finney County and in Garden City. We're looking at maybe a 1/4 undercount, which means out of every 4 at-risk families, 1 did not do the census, and 3 of them still did the census. But if that's the case, if we really had a 1/4 undercount, the population estimate for Finney County from the census was 38,470. However, if we did have that undercount of 1/4, which is a little bit more conservative than some of the experts that I talked to thought, we're talking about actually a true population of 46,000 people live in Finney County. Which really, the problem with this is that gives us a really big undercount of 7,600 people. And the people that are undercounted are at the most vulnerable, that are at-risk population. So when we're talking about distributing statewide funds to address specific topics, we're going to miss out on some of those funds just because it was harder to count those people in our community versus counting populations in other communities that don't have as much at-risk population. So what we really need to think about as Finney County and Garden City residents, but also as Western Kansas, is that this really does kind of change the picture of what it actually looks like for population growth in Kansas. And so if we go to the next chart, we can see if we apply that 1/4 undercount of at-risk populations to every county, again, it's going to affect us in Southwest Kansas the most because we have the highest proportion. But we really get a really different picture of what the growth of the population in Kansas is. If you look for the western quarter of the state, we really have either stable or increasing population almost across the board, which is really impressive when we're talking about the typical conversations that people have about rural Kansas or rural America is that it's declining. And that's not to say it's not declining everywhere. If you look at north central or southeast Kansas, we do still see a pretty dramatic decline of population there. But out here in western Kansas, we really do see actually a pretty good increase in population. And a lot of that's due to the diversity that we're seeing in our industries. First, just at having agriculture where people do need to eat no matter what's going on, so you don't really have the fluctuations there. But increasing cattle production, increasing dairy production, really does help not just Garden City, but it does help all these communities and all the communities surrounding us as well. So that's really good to see. We do have a pretty forward-looking population growth. And then even if we break it down into regions, we can see that percentage-wise, if we break Kansas down into 9 regions, the southwest part of Kansas is the fastest growing region in all of Kansas. Not the number of people, Still, Kansas City, people-wise, added more people. But percentage growth, what's the change in percentage of growth? It is, we're actually the fastest growing in the region. So if we go look at the population trends for Finney County, we can see the growth from 1960 to 2010. We grew about 2.5% per year. And then if we take our time from now, 2020, and project forward, and what we're doing is looking at our normal growth, our industrial capacity, some of the stuff from the housing study that we did. We see that we're projected to grow about 1 to a little bit less than 1.5% per year, but a 64% increase over the next 50 years. Interestingly, that would put us at about 70,000 people in our county by 2070. But if we look at some of the actual housing needs that we have right now, we see, like, and we talked about this, like with the city commission goals, where we're talking about 4,000 new units. And where does that come from? Where does that 4,000 new units by 2030 come from? So let's look at the housing need and then see what the ramifications would be on the population. So right now, if you look at how many jobs we have open in Finney County, and so this is what this is doing is looking at the electronic postings, and there's about 1,000 electronic posted jobs right now. But for each one of those electronically posted jobs, that doesn't necessarily mean it's just one job opening. Okay, so how do we get to this 3,000 jobs? So what we're looking at is the electronic postings for jobs, which right now in Finney County there's about 1,000 electronic postings available for jobs. But each one of those jobs postings doesn't correlate exactly to one job. For example, we talked to some local companies in the area, and they had one job posting that actually was for 14 actually employees that they needed to hire. And that's not just this one. We talked to a bunch of them. So we did a kind of a informal survey, and we kind of came up for every one electronic job posting there is, they're really trying to hire on average about 3 positions. So we have about 3,000 job positions open right now. And if we need to construct housing to hold, we're going to say roughly a little bit less than half of those new positions. That means we'll need to build about 1,350 housing units just to be able to have the people to fill the current positions that we have open. Then if we look at the 1%, the average 1% growth rate that we have for the last 10 years, we'll see for the next 5 years that we'll need to increase about 1,000 housing units there, 1,023. We see on the east side of town that Empirical Foods is well underway, and they will be fully up and running late 2024, 2025. But with that project and then the ancillary projects that come with those other companies that come and aren't part of the Empirical, but they're part of other trucking companies and all the little pieces that come with when you have a large business like that come in. That's going to be about another 1,300 jobs. And again, if we need to build about 50%, 45% housing to fill those needs, that's another 585 jobs. And then the 1% growth from 2025 to 2030 is about another 1,000 housing units we'll need, so about 1,061. So if we take all those housing needs and add them all together, by 2030, that's about 4,000. It's 4,019, or 400 units per year. So that's where we get that goal from. But what is the ramifications? Those aren't pie in the sky like we hope to build these housing units so people come and the jobs come. These are really what's happening. These are the current jobs that need to be filled, jobs that are very close to coming online here within the next year or two, and then just our traditional conservative growth. But if we look at that and we plot that out, if we were to build those 4,000 units, and then on average when we build a unit in Finney County, it's 2.9 people that live in each of those units, the population that we see would actually be 57,741 by 2030. Which seems incredible. That's a huge amount of growth for our community. But if you go look at what that works out to be per year, that's at 2.5%. And this is something that we've actually been growing. If we go look back at our historical growth from 1960 to 2010, we actually see that we've grown about 2.5% per year during that whole span. So even though it sounds like a really big number to grow by 4,000 units by 2030, it's something that we've done before, and it's just the growth that we see out in this region. So big number, a big goal. But it's doable, and already working with companies that are looking at doing development in the housing, the builders development group. We really are on pace to maybe actually hit this target. So that's really exciting for our area. We've seen that one of the things that we need to do to be able to attract the population is to have a good community. So one of the really good things that we saw this last year is Garden City actually won an award as being one of the top 5 most satisfied residents in the nation. And so this is a company that goes through and actually measures social media, Twitter and Facebook and that kind of stuff, and sees what the people in those communities are saying about their community. So this isn't like a survey where you can kind of have everybody like vote yes, that Garden City is really good. I mean, this is really what people are talking about their community. And so we actually came out as one of the top 5 communities in the nation. And another one is one of the Front Range Colorado towns. I mean, it's not like we were competing with other plains states or something like that. I mean, it was nationwide, and most of the other communities were large communities. So that's really good to know that our community really is satisfied, and that's something that people in the area and the nation can see and decide to maybe locate or at least look at Garden City when they're looking to relocate for a job or something like that. Another thing that we really are focusing on in Garden City is our retail trade. And if we look at a recently conducted study, we have a map here of the retail trade in our area. If you look at the people that come and shop in and use Garden City as their trade hub, our trade area is actually 282,000 people, which is a lot more than just the people in Finney County or just people in Finney and Ford in that. So our trade area really has grown over the last 10 years to include all the way up to Colby and Goodland and the eastern Colorado, the panhandles of Oklahoma and Texas. And we all know this because if you don't remember to go shopping during the week at Sam's and you go on the weekend, you really do see the variety of license plates at Shulman Crossing and Sam's and at the plaza and stuff like that. So that's been really good. And one of the things that's really interesting about our trade area is we actually have a pretty high income trade area. And this is really surprising to some of those people that look to locate businesses that they're based in the coast and they really think that there's not really a lot of income out here in western Kansas. But I mean, we know, we have cattle and farms and stuff like that. And there's a decent amount of income being made there. Our trade area, we capture about $10.2 billion worth of personal income. And in Garden City's trade area, to put that in perspective, some other trade area, metro trade areas, Topeka Metro's personal income is $11 billion, so a little bit more than us. Santa Fe, New Mexico is $9.1 billion, and Pueblo, Colorado is $6.9 billion. So when we're talking about the income that our trade area encompasses, it's on the scale of a pretty large metro area. We don't have the population necessarily in the city or the county itself, but overall we have a pretty good reach and a good economic base there. And so I include this chart as just one of the things that when we're talking with companies who I mean, if you're from New Jersey or if you're from Los Angeles, and they're saying, well, what's your population within 5 miles? Because that's the only people who are going to be driving to your stores. I'm like, no. People from 100 miles away, 120 miles away will be driving to Garden City to shop. So we made this chart here to show that if you want to go to Sam's Club or Target or any of those things, you really do have to drive in where that trade area is marked because there really aren't those options other places. And this is a good thing to keep in mind when we're talking about our region and why we're successful. It's partially because we do have the critical mass of retail trade that do come to Garden City. So a demonstration of the strength of our retail market is if we look at this next slide or the next chart here. This is a bunch of the communities that are about our size. The top line is Salina, and then we have Hutchinson, and then we have Manhattan is the light blue line, and then Garden City, Finney County is that thick yellow line. And we can see from 2010 to 2021, we really have had some increases in our retail sales. And this is really exciting. The line that we started with that kind of stayed flat where we moved up, that's Hayes. And so we can kind of see that over the last 10 years, not only have we had positive growth, where not very many communities had a similar growth, we've gone from being kind of in our area where Hayes and Garden City was operating about the same. We're now in the realm of operating at a community level like Manhattan and Hutchinson. So that's really exciting. And further, if we look at the extension of that line and look at the data that we're getting in for 2022, and we don't have all the data in yet, but as long as we finish out like we've been doing the beginning of this part of this year, we'll actually be on pace to break $1 billion in retail sales, which is it's a huge number to break, because that's one of those numbers that's easy to convey to prospects looking to move to Garden City. When you say it's a simple number, $1 billion of retail sales is a really simple number that kind of puts you at this threshold. But we'll see how the other communities do, like Manhattan and Hutchinson. But they haven't broke that $1 billion before. So this will be a number that possibly is one of the top in our area, and puts us continually to move forward. Also, with the strong retail sales, we see that we have strong GDP, so our industrial output. What's the production looking like in our communities? So what this chart is here is just the GDP for each county from 2020. I don't have the 2021 data yet. I'd like to go look at it. It looks like we have really strong data for 2021. But I don't have the final numbers for that, so we're looking at 2020 data. But a pretty good breakdown. You can definitely see the different corridors. You have that Kansas City area as a production center, the Wichita area, and then here in Southwest Kansas with Finney, Ford, and Seward County. So good industrial output that continues to move in a positive direction. We're definitely going to see that continue to grow as we not only just grow organically, but also big projects like Imperial Cocoa coming online. That's going to definitely help that GDP overall. But what's even more interesting is the next chart. And this one, when we presented this to somebody, we had some officials out from the eastern part of town, or eastern part of the state, and they said, when you're presenting this, you really shouldn't present this, because this is going to kind of make people in eastern Kansas mad. So that's why I included here. If we look at our GDP per person, so per capita, we see that the production that we have in not just Finney County, but all of western Kansas, the amount of industrial output that we have per person really outpaces most of eastern Kansas. And there's only a few communities that really have the output per person that most of the counties in western Kansas have. So again, that GDP number might be small for these smaller counties that have less population, but the amount that they're producing per person is really high. And really, if we're talking about who's bringing the most value to Kansas, it's the western Kansas. The western part of the state really is bringing the most amount of value and most amount of industrial output to the state per person. We also saw this, that with the commercial hub that we are, and the high income and the high GDP per person. We also saw that in 2022, Garden City got the ranking of second best place in Kansas to start a business. So that was a really good thing to see, and it kind of reinforces what we've seen with the growth that we've seen recently. So that was really good. And with all this growth, it really leads to talking about why is growth important to the community? Besides making a community more attractive and giving us more things to do, part of the reason that we really like to see growth in Finney County and Garden City is because as we grow our economic base, we're allowed to provide the same level of services or more services for the same mill rate that we're doing. So the valuation might change, but the mills that we levy can be the same. In Garden City over the last 10 years has really had a flat, slightly down mill that we've been doing. So why is this? And so this chart that we have here is looking at the valuation of Finney County from 2007 to 2021. The really important pieces to look at is we have those dark blue bars, and you can see what the valuation, that's the real property valuation of Finney County. And you can see in 2007 it was just over 200 million. In 2021, it's over 400 million. So we're talking about a 100%. We've doubled the valuation, but what things are worth in Finney County, we've doubled this. And this is if you go look at I have open presentations about a bunch of things. If one of the things I said is how much of this is due to inflation or just being in Western Kansas, and really most of that growth is due to actual growth and not inflation or something like that. But what's really interesting to see is as with the yellow and the light blue lines, the utility and the valuation coming from oil and gas, as they've shrunk, look how big those bars are in 2007 versus how it is in 2021. As those pieces of our valuations decreased, we've been able to grow our property valuations and grow things like DFA and TP&L and all these things that Shulman Crossing and the things that keep on growing our valuation to be able to keep our overall valuation pretty steady. And this isn't the case everywhere. If we weren't growing like we were growing, and we really were dependent on utility valuation or dependent on oil and gas valuation, those valuations would be much smaller, which means, and that's what that 2021A bar is. If we kept the same valuation from 2007, but had the current oil and gas and utility valuations, that's what our current valuation would be, which means when we're talking about trying to keep the same level of services that we have, we're either going to have to raise the mill rate, and we're talking close to a doubling of the mills, or we're going to have to cut services. And so being able to grow our community like this really has been able to keep us growing without just dramatically having to either increase the mill rate or having to cut services. So the growth that we've had isn't just good because it makes our city more attractive for other things to come in and make it a better place to live. It also does help us do relief on mill rates and things like that. Also, being a retail hub means that we can shift some of that tax burden for things that are local but regionally used. So, for example, like the airport. Since we have the good retail base, when we're talking about doing improvements to that, like the sales tax measure that actually is part of the funding for rebuilding the airport, we can do that as a sales tax instead of a property tax, and that means that the people that are coming in from the region to shop are actually helping build that project, and it's not just based on Finney County taxpayers, property owners. So having a strong growth with your property valuations, having a strong retail base really means that we can continue to grow and not have undue burden on our citizens. And some of those projects like the airport where it's being used by our region, that we can kind of spread those costs out to those people in the region to help pay for those. One quick note that I'd like to talk about before we look at the last couple of things is the water sustainability. One of the things that we get a lot of questions about me when I'm working in economic development is, well, how long do we have water for in Western Kansas before we're just going to dry up and blow away? And so I'm working on a project that's called iCare, which is a project for Oglala State sustainability. This was a pilot year where we were just looking at Finney County. Next year we'll be looking at the whole southwest Kansas corner of the state. But what it really is looking at the test wells and then saying over the years how much water has been pumped out of all these wells and then what's the natural recharge. And what do we have to do to be able to have a sustainable Ogallala? So how much do we have to use to be able to be sustainable? And so if we would say all of our water, and again, this is for just Finney County, and this is on average. So different parts of the county will have different specific numbers. But if we look at the county overall, the amount of water, and we say that's A, that circle A is all the water we're using right now. If we needed to get to a number that was sustainable, so how much do we need to do? We need to reduce the amounts of water used from the A circle to the B circle. And really, it is smaller. That B circle is smaller, but it's 17% smaller. But really, this puts into perspective how close we are to getting to a place where we can be sustainable. And there's a lot of history. I mean, you all know this if you're from the area about this. So a lot of the work that's been done in the past has got us to a place that we're at right now. And it's not to say that we've fixed this, we fixed it or anything like that. We still have work to go. But knowing that we have a reduction that seems to be obtainable with better practices, water use practices, and better varieties and stuff like that, it really does look like we can be at a place, at least from the initial pilot study here in Finney County, that we can get this to a place that we do have a sustainable aquifer, and we can continue to grow indefinitely and not be on a 20 or 50 or 100-year clock like some people say. So just know that project's out there, and we're looking at that, and the initial reports do show that we still do need to do some work, but there's some positive news there. So getting back to some fun things, one of the things that we're talking about is the regional airport. And so if we look at how that regional airport is doing, we see that the most updated data through October has us at 24,000 employments, and that is actually more than all the other regional airports, Hayes, Liberal, and Dodge, all combined. So we more than 50% of the flights in western Kansas flying out of western Kansas is going through our airport. And we actually are the third busiest commercial airport in the state. Number one is Wichita, number two is Manhattan, and then we're the third busiest airport. And if we continue this trend for the rest of the year, we will just be short of 29,000, or just short of 30,000 at 29,585 passengers. What's good, though, is we see that the demand is there, and American Airlines is confident in our market. So starting today, as of when we're recording this, which is November 30th, we're actually getting a bigger plane, the CRJ 700s, that are going to be, they can go between 65 to 76 passengers, depending on how they configure it, which is 40% larger planes than we're currently getting. So we have good numbers, and we're actually going to be getting larger planes in. All right, so let's get back to the original question: is what's Garden City's brand? What's when the mayor of New York is saying Kansas doesn't have a brand and it doesn't stand for anything? What is our brand? And that's kind of been what we've been talking about, and it's been growth, and it's intentional growth, and it's purposeful growth, and it's growth for all. So the chart that I have here, this is data from Wichita State University, the Center of Economic Development and Business Research, and they do economic indicators, and they've been tracking this data since 2001. So this data goes all the way back to 2001. And what I did here is I scaled all the data. So we said, how are you doing in 2001? And then how have you been growing for the last 20 years? And so there's a whole bunch of squiggles on here. And you can see, I mean, if you go up, that means you've been doing better on these economic indicators for the last 20 years. If you go down, that means you've been doing worse than you were in 2001. And so the question is, so where's Finney County? How are we doing in Garden City and Finney County? And if you try to pick out what line it is on that chart, again, there's 105 counties in Finney County, so there's 100 and some lines there. The thing is, I didn't put Finney County on that chart. We have to go and add that line. If we add where Finney County is at in our economic indicators since 2001 from outside group, this is from Wichita State, we see that not only are we doing good, we are doing really well. This is all 105 counties, and there is clearly one county that's been doing much better than the rest, and that's Finney County, and that's that bold yellow line there. So some of that brand, what is our brand? And the brand that we all know, we know what the brand of Garden City is. And the brand of Garden City is that the world grows here. And we have that brand, and when people see it, it means something. Thank you. Thanks for listening to this whole presentation. Have a great last of 2020 and a great 2023.